You can worry less about grenades now.
I would not have said it like that, but it is cool.
Good evening, lads. Hello everyone, my name is Blackwatch and welcome to another episode of How to Master, and in this week's episode we're looking at Marius Striker, also known as Jager. He's a defender on the GSG9 CTU and he's a 2-speed, 2 armour. Now we're going to be talking about his strengths, his weaknesses, his loadout and some tips. Timestamps in the description and the comments. If you enjoy the video, subscribe, like, all that good stuff. So he has the 416C carbine. This is arguably the best defender weapon. Maestro's Alda definitely has an argument there, but I'd say in terms of the fact that it has a nice reload as well that's much faster than the Alda and is a little bit faster for the ADS. For the role that Jager fits, this is the perfect gun. It is the best roamer gun in the game. So there you go. So you're going to be using this, but if you're liking memes, then you go for the M870 shotgun. This is actually a really good pump action shotgun, but again, you want performance, and with performance, you'll get that from the 416C. So that's the option we're going for. And he only has one sidearm, that's the P12 pistol, and it's bang average. Low damage, very low recoil, high cap. Pretty standard stuff for that kind of pistol. Secondary gadgets, he's got the bulletproof camera, which is always good, and barbed wire, which is also always good. It's up to yourself if you prefer one or the other. I usually bring barbed wire because I'm just a traditionalist like that, but the bulletproof cam is very useful. And his unique gadget is the ADS Mark IV Magpie. So this is referred to as the ADS in the game by everyone. This is a thing that can eat projectiles. So the projectiles it can eat exactly are frag grenades, stun grenades, smoke grenades, Thatcher's EMP grenades, Ash's breaching rounds, the little mini grenades that come out of the cluster charge from Fuse, Ying's Candelas, Sophia's impacts and their concussions, air jabs from Nomad, lances from Kali, and now Argus cams from Mr. Fisher. The only things that it can intercept are Capitows, flame bolts, and Gridlock's cheeky boys. So whenever she throws out the big tracks thing, the ADS doesn't eat it. As a result of this big menu of things that it can eat, it means that it's a very potent gadget when it comes to dealing with projectiles, which is something that you'll pretty much always need for a defending team. That's why he's so bloody useful, and that's why no matter how much Jager gets nerfed, he is one of the most resilient operators in the game because he just doesn't give a toss about any nerf. He continues to be massively overpicked. He continues to perform well. He's just the talisman in the defending team. Basically, if you don't bring him, why not, really? That's kind of the argument that gets thrown out there. Unless he's banned, there's no reason not to have a Jager on your team. So, this ADS has a 5.5 meter range. It only has one charge at any one time for each thing, so you get 3 of them in total. They all have a single charge in. That charge is expended when it destroys any of the listed gadgets, and then it is inactive for the next 10 seconds, and then after those 10 seconds are done, another charge gets added in. So basically it will infinitely eat things as long as it's given enough time between charges. As a result, this means that you have to adapt your strategies to what it used to be, which was where you could have one ADS covering 2 projectiles in one area at one time, but once those charges were eaten, that was it. So obviously it's changed now, and so we have to adapt things as a result. In terms of the pros that Jager has as an operator, best in class gun, as I said, it's a very good primary weapon. On defense, it's definitely one of the most comfortable to use. Very low recoil, great damage, a high rate of fire, and yeah, just a really comfortable gun to use. Other one, he's always useful. There is never really any situation where Jager is going to be a hang on. He's always helpful after his death as well. That's one of the things that I kind of measure the strength of an operator on, is whether or not they can impact the team, which obviously he can very well, and whether or not his impact for the team can be carried on after he's dead and buried. And again, his gadget persists after his death, so he's very strong. His gun is very good. He's very easy to pick up as well. If you're new to the game, then Jager is not difficult to start. He's perfectly suited as an anchor as well as he is as a roamer. So if you're not confident with roaming, he's a very good one to start learning how to roam with. And if you just really don't want to roam with him, you don't have to, but he is good in that role. Cons, very few. I'm kind of reaching for these ones. So he doesn't have an angled grip on his primary. That's one of the only things that I'd say is a significant downside, because if he had an angled grip, he would be unstoppable, but you know, he doesn't, and so you have to deal with that quite slow ADS, because his ADS on his weapon is an assault rifle ADS rather than like an SMG ADS, which is faster. But the gun's damage and accuracy make up for that particular downside. He can't counter certain projectiles. I went over which ones those were. So Capitao and Gridlock, he can't counter those two gadgets, but it's a small downside overall, especially in casual play or in lower level rank play. You're not going to see a huge amount of Capitao picked, and Gridlock is not necessarily going to be using her tracks in sight anyway, so it's not a huge downside. And the last downside, which is again totally reaching, his secondary is pretty dull. It doesn't do a lot, it doesn't really come into play a lot, and so, you know, if it's not seen, it's not heard, it's not something to worry about. In terms of the tips, I've got a few for you, and hopefully these will be the things that will elevate your play, or if you're already playing with them well, maybe just give you a little insight into something that you didn't know, or maybe want to consider in the future. So, you want to think like an attacker when you're placing your ADSs. If I were attacking this site, where would I be throwing projectiles from? And this can be quite unconventional places, so if you've got certain drone holes that are lethal, such as the ones on coastline that you can drop grenades through the ceiling and they'll drop through vent holes and blow people up, might be worth putting an ADS near those if they're spots that you think the enemy team are going to take advantage of. But just generally making sure that whenever you're placing an ADS, it's in a place that's likely to actually see some action, because otherwise you're not going to get any value out of it, and you always want to be squeezing out as much value as possible when you can. The other thing is, make sure you're using all of your gadgets at the start. I understand he gets played as a roamer a lot, and that's fine, but you want to make sure that you've done all your jobs. Now, you can obviously pass on your reinforcements for other people to do, that's fine, but just make sure that all three ADSs are placed, and that your barbed wire is placed, or your deployable camera is placed. But bear in mind, you can also use them for yourself, so you know, you'll want to place them down in those areas. By them, I mean the barbed wire and the bulletproof camera. Generally speaking, it's not the best idea to use your ADSs for yourself, because you're hopefully not going to be getting as much pressure. But if you've got a team that's very active and does like to use utility to flush you out of roaming positions, that's when it would make sense for you to then use an ADS. So that's perfectly acceptable. Just balance up the two things over whether or not it's actually really going to be useful to you, if you're going to take that upstairs, and who's going to be missing out as a result of you taking it. Consider doubling up your ADSs in key spots that you really need to hold. So things like blue on bank, if you've got a teammate holding in there, you may want to consider giving him two ADSs so he has that extra peace of mind whilst he's holding this position. If not, fair enough, but you know, you can do that if you want to. Obviously you're gambling a lot on putting two ADSs in the one spot, you're potentially losing a lot as well, but if it's helpful, then it will be really helpful, so it can potentially make the difference between holding an area that's essential and losing an area that's essential, or losing a teammate. Remember that he has a huge amount of reserve ammo for his primary weapon, and you can use that to your advantage. Peek everything, fire at everything. I say peek everything, don't peek everything, that's a bad plan. But you know, if you're feeling cheeky and you think that someone's at a barricade, you don't have to think, oh well, this magazine's the only one I've got in my pocket. I've only got, you know, 2 9mm Parabellum rounds and a 5.56 that's bent in half. You've got loads of stuff in those pockets, deep pockets, and so just try everything, why not? You never know what kills you'll get through a barricade. I got a couple in my clips here, so you might get some too. Know that you can actually comfortably win gunfights 1v1, and even more than 1v1, and you want to play with that level of confidence in mind. You have a fantastic gun, a really, really strong 1v1 weapon, and so don't feel like you're at a disadvantage like you would be if you're going into a fight with an MP5. You have something that even if you're not hitting headshots, it's going to be slapping them hard for every hit that you get, and so you want to play with that and know that you're a real contender whenever you're in a gunfight. Try not to spend the whole match playing like a Jawa. It's very easy as a roamer to get a bit worried about how you sound and the amount of noise you're making, but oftentimes you'll find the best roamers are the ones who are confidently going into firefights. They are making noise, but they are more accurate and they're faster. So, you know, don't always rely on sneaky, I'm going to flank and no one's going to know I'm here. You want to also get kills because you're just a better shot than them, or because you used Peeker's advantage, because, you know, that still exists in the game, and that's still almost essential to winning firefights. Use your ADSs on teammates who need them. I've already mentioned this in the part where I was talking about doubling up, but sometimes your teammates are going to need those ADSs in spots that are maybe a bit strange, so off-site or wherever else. But if you have someone who's holding a position that is important, like Blue on bank, I keep going back to that example because that's one of the most clean examples I can think of, that's where he really needs that utility. And so you've got to consider, is it more important to put it there versus on site? Yeah, probably, because otherwise one frag and he's done. So, you know, help out your teammates. Make sure that you can't see the ADS easily on the other side. So if you're thinking like an attacker, you should also be looking like an attacker. I say this about Legion as well. You want to look from the perspective of the person who's going to be pushing into your area with an ADS or pushing into your goo mine. Ask yourself, can he see the ADS? And if he can see the ADS, can he shoot it? Because if they can, then what's the point in having it there? The whole point of the ADS is that it's supposed to be something that they have to feed to get past it, or they have to leave it alone. Either situation for them should be bad. So in placing your stuff, you want to make sure it's in a position where it can't be seen and therefore has to be fed or has to be ignored, because otherwise they'll just shoot it and then you have no value out of it whatsoever, because the enemy losing a bullet is nowhere near as good as the enemy losing a smoke grenade. When you're playing as a roamer, try your best to anticipate the enemy. So you want to figure out in your head, where have they been coming from? If you're later into the rounds and you've been struggling to fight against them, that's what you need to think about. Where have they actually been getting in the building? How many have been pushing in at once? How can I counter that? Where can I position myself where I have a safe fallback, but I can also try to deal with them then and there and get some kills early on? And if you're not in that position where you're having to address a losing match or a dominant team, you can just try and anticipate in advance. Think, where would I have gone in? Where would my team normally enter from? What are the kind of hot spots for people to be moving in? And I'm not necessarily talking about where's the place that everyone's going to drop, because usually the dominant pushing point is a place that's quite safe because they'll be taking control of it. Whereas what you want is you want somewhere maybe a bit more fringe, somewhere where you're more likely to get a 1v1. The kind of places where people go, oh, nobody's going to be here, so I can get inside the building, so then peekers aren't an issue and I can just walk about and do what I need to do. Try and figure out those spots and take them and hold them as best you can. When you're doing the roam and you have a spot that you need to defend, say you're upstairs on cafe or something like that, and you're trying to hold that for your team that's defending in reading room and dining, then your response should be to basically hold on as long as you possibly can. There's a lot of people who will just fire shots and then run away. You want to be trying to do more than that. You want to not give up territory unless you absolutely have to. Obviously we don't want you to die, but if you're just conceding after firing 2 shots, then you dying is a small problem in the grand scheme of the team losing the round because that territory has been ceded too quickly. You can give the territory up if it's looking hopeless, but you want to make sure that they've fought for it or that you've wasted time in them trying to capture that territory, because if they don't have enough time to execute, hopefully that will play into you later on. Again, balance the risk of being killed with the benefits of keeping them off a spot longer rather than losing it sooner. If you're feeling spicy, you can use your own camera or barbed wire to cover your own flank. So if you're holding one of those spots like I mentioned, then you can always just crack the camera up and get a dead teammate or a living teammate who's on site not doing hellish much to keep an eye on it, or you can just put some barbed wire down, get those headphones cranked up and make sure that you can hear them rustling away inside the metal. That way you're not having to have the unfortunate situation of roaming to the other side of a territory you're controlling just to find out that someone has managed to walk in the time that you've been in the opposite end. It's not a good feeling, it's not very nice. And lastly, don't be afraid to help on site. Your gun alone makes you a very, very potent anchor. You're going to hit people hard and you're going to win gunfights that certain anchors wouldn't otherwise win. So I know that the thing is, roam with Jager, rush with Ash, but you don't have to do these things. These are all just kind of preconceived notions that don't necessarily apply to your gameplay. It's not a particularly competitive based environment in ranked. Obviously people will try to adapt competitive strats into that sphere, but they don't always translate because it's a totally different style of play. And in that same vein, certain conventions maybe don't fit with the way that you play or the way that your team plays or the way that the enemy is playing. So that way you can adapt and you can do different things and you're not forced into doing the same thing with every operator that you play as. So there you go. If you want to anchor as Jager, or if you don't want to do like a little shallow roam or something like that, you don't have to be going deep into enemy lines in different places. If you're not feeling confident or if you're just starting out, feel free to use them on site. No one is going to have a go at you. If they do have a go at you, mute them, report them, problem solved. You don't need that negativity in your life, my boy or girl. Although the audience is very, very skewed in the male direction, so it's probably more my boy. But anyway, hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you in the next one. As I said at the start, if you enjoy the videos that I've been creating, please subscribe, leave a like. All of it makes a big difference, pushes me up in the algorithm, and it gets us on top, because the more views and likes and things, the more content I'm going to be pushing out, and hopefully we'll continue to make your transition into learning Siege as smooth as it possibly can be. So have some good games, lads. Have a good week ahead. Dos vidania, everybody. Bye bye.
Disable their diffuser. Located a diffuser. Destroy it. Bomb diffusing device is disabled. Mission successful.